Welcome to this week's rant entitled Who Owns the Name Oberheim? But let's first wish all those mothers happy Mother's Day, because they are the mums that put up with us, the musicians. So happy Mother's Day to any mothers watching. It is the 14th, and I do know that this tends to sort of slip a few weeks one way or another depending on where you are in the world, but in the UK it is Mother's Day. And secondly, before we get into sort of the body of this, let's talk about channel courtesy. And I'm kind of doing this a bit tongue-in-cheek, but now, if you've watched the channel at all over the years, you know that I actively engage in debate. It's part of what the mailbag feature is all about. You ask questions, or you leave comments, and you start debates, and I kind of monitor them and relay them back. But that's really what it's all about. Airing other tubers' opinions on stuff the channel does is good. But I do insist on respect. Don't call other tubers names. Don't call them stupid. Don't call them, just be respectful. If you're answering a question left by another tuber, even if you think it's stupid, give it some respect and some courtesy, because they're obviously asking the question because they don't know what the answer is. You can have a different opinion, but just be respectful. And this is the type of disrespect we get from trolls. And most of this, this never hits the channel, because obviously I have a policy of screening comments, mainly actually to do with the fact that you get a huge amount of porn users trying to direct you to porn sites. So to stop those sort of links going on the channel, I just screen all the comments. But that's just to stop that sort of thing happening. Anyway, so congratulations, Matt Cosby. You received this week's Sayonara Award for your comment, "Does he really think we are F stupid?" As I said, if you want to behave like that, the first thing that happens is you get banned from the channel and you get reported to YouTube. And if you go and look at the channels of these people writing these comments, they have no history. They are completely trolls. So that's kind of the thing you have to put up with. If you look at any personality, the amount of hate mails and hate comments they get is phenomenal from these sort of people. But hey ho, that's what happens. And for the record, I don't think anybody is stupid, but people have different opinions, and people also have different skill sets. And that's one thing that's very important to bear in mind when reading somebody's comment or question. Okay, this is the bit where we do the channel self-promotion, so skip ahead if you want. But normal parish notices must be observed. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not? Hit the subscribe icon. If you want to be notified when videos hit the channel about legacy stuff, the mailbag, the rant, whatever it happens to be, that's the bell icon. If you like the contents of the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Put comments down below. I do read them. I even make videos about them if it's so required. So, all that sort of stuff, please carry on. And finally, down the bottom here somewhere should be the address of the TG community. Now, for less than the price of a cup of coffee, which is really a bargain, you can help support the channel and the production of videos going forward. But now, back to this particular video. So back to the title of this video, Who Owns the Name Oberheim? Now, many people will probably jump in and say Tom Oberheim, but that's not necessarily true. If you have been on the Music Tribe's website recently, you will notice that it lists the brand Oberheim as one of its brands, or it's one of theirs. Now, for those who don't know, Music Tribes is the holding company for Behringer. So effectively Behringer is saying that it owns Oberheim. But it's not that simple, and I'll explain why. Back in 2019, Gibson made a big thing in the music press by giving back the name Oberheim to Tom Oberheim, the engineer that lent his name to Oberheim Electronics, which was a company founded in 1969, I think. And this was the company that gave us, right in the early days, the TV S1 in the early 70s, through the OB-X and the OB-XA in the 80s, and through to the sort of Matrix 6 and Matrix 12 in the mid to late 80s. And also, during this period of time, they also had the DM and DMX drum machines that many of us covered so much. And we'll come back to the OBXA in a few minutes. Oberheim basically went bust. Just let me remove my script screen. In 1995. So in 1995, end of company. And there was a bit of hoo-ha about this next bit, but a group of lawyers effectively bought the company, renamed it Oberheim ECC. Tom was still at the helm, I might add, and from what I can read, this is what we used to call in the accountancy circles as a Phoenix company, or Phoenix Corporation, in essence born from the ashes of the previous company. They used to do what they call pre-packaged liquidations. Effectively, the assets of the company and the company name and any goodwill are sold on to a new owner, and the old company effectively is left to wither and die. Anyway, that's how I think this transaction happened. But after 2 years, Tom left, and then the Phoenix went bust for the second time, and that was 1998. So it only actually traded for probably about 2.5 years in essence. That was the point where Gibson then swooped in and bought the Oberheim name out of the bankruptcy courts. And at this point, Oberheim became a Gibson brand, until it was supposedly given back to Tom Oberheim in 2019 as part of a goodwill gesture from Gibson. I suspect that the Oberheim brand didn't quite fit with the whole Gibson brand, and obviously we know Gibson for guitars, not for synthesizers. So this is where it becomes interesting, because now you have to say who owns the name Oberheim. And this is where something called brand law comes into play, and it's known as different things in different parts of the world. So you may know it as something different. And I'm not a brand lawyer, and therefore I'm not going to comment in any detail on this, because in whatever region you look in the world, I'm probably going to be wrong. But that's the disclaimer done. So this is just a general overview of the principles of this area. So the issue with brands, patents and trademarks is that they're jurisdiction dependent. So if you want to trade in a jurisdiction and you want to protect your trading name, your brand, trademarks or anything like that, or any of your what we call intellectual property, which is what this is colloquially known as, then you have to register it in the jurisdiction you're trading to protect it, because there's nothing to stop somebody else effectively forming a company and claiming that they had been trading as that name before you got there. And then you get into a very, very sticky piece of legal work, and it is quite complex as far as I understand the whole thing around brands and rights and intellectual property. Anyway, the thing is, intellectual property changes whatever jurisdiction you're in. So the rules in one jurisdiction, say the US, are not necessarily the same as the rules in the UK, and not necessarily the same as the rules in the European Union or Southeast Asia or wherever it happens to be you're trading. And this is where we now have brand confusion. So earlier this week I read an article stating that Beringer had failed to register Beringer Oberheim in the US. And the court papers, which I did skim read, I didn't read the sort of finer detail on it, but I skim read the sort of the salient points because they summarise it. Stated that the reason that Beringer failed to do this in the US was because Tom Oberheim is a famous audio engineer, and the name Oberheim is associated with his work and instruments, electronics, etc. that he has developed, or his company has developed, or people around him have developed. The point is with this is the word, or the phrase in US. This is only in the US. There is only one Tom Oberheim. He might own the rights to use Oberheim trading name in the US, but it appears that Behringer has managed to acquire the Oberheim name in Europe. And this is following a court case in the European Patents Court, where a judgment was raised in 2019 that effectively revoked the rights of the Oberheim name on electronic music equipment. So effectively in Europe, the trading name Oberheim, the brand Oberheim was effectively put up for grabs. And that's possibly what's happened here. So we have to ask ourselves, why does Behringer want the Oberheim name? Well, put bluntly, unless you've been living under a stone for the last couple of years, you will know, especially if you move in synthesizer circles, that Behringer have been working on a clone of Oberheim's OBXA, which has become known as the Behringer UBXA, the Behringer OBXA. I don't think they've actually issued it with the branding Oberheim UBXA or Oberheim OBXA yet. Although I did see reference in another article to the fact that there had been some mock-ups done with the word Oberheim, not the word Behringer on it. But the bottom line is, if Behringer owned the rights to use the Oberheim name, they could issue the synth quite legally as Oberheim's OBXA, because they owned the name. There is a further twist to this, and the twist is around Tom Oberheim. So Tom Oberheim has been working with Dave Smith through the Sequential brand, and back in I think it was 2016. Back in 2016, they issued the OB6, which was a synthesizer under the Sequential branding. And recently, it has been disclosed that Sequential has filed a patent, or a trademark application, I think is more correct, for the OBX and the OBXA, I believe. And I suppose their argument is that Tom Oberheim is working for them, and therefore they have more rights to the trading name of the synthesizer than Behringer might have for the trading name. So I don't think this story is quite over yet. We are expecting the OBX or the UBXA to appear at some point this year. Behringer made a bunch of statements about a month or so ago about the fact that it had now cleared, I suppose, beta testing, and it was going out to people in the field to test. And these were people that understood the original Oberheim machine, so they either have an Oberheim machine or were involved in designing or some sort of aspect of the Oberheim machine. And so these things were being sent out to these people to test, to ensure that A, it was robust, and B, it had the right sounds on it, and it sounded like an Oberheim XA with the appropriate Behringer modifications and reimagination on it. So it's getting close to it being launched, but this sort of cycle can take several months. And I kind of had it in my mind when they made these statements back in, I think it was end of January, early February, that we would probably be seeing this synthesizer somewhere around June as a launch. Because once you as long as you've can have made sure that the circuitry is all right, then you can actually start putting out the contracts for the mass build of things like the injection molding for the casing and the circuit boards to be printed and components to be soldered onto it. So you can effectively get all the supply chain in place to actually make this stuff ready to roll. And then really what you're looking at is minor changes to maybe the firmware going forward. That's kind of how this stuff works. So I don't think the story's over yet. I think there's maybe some legal battles to come. But until next time, live long and prosper. Bye bye.